If you were to say there's one verse that really I would say this is my favorite, it's Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. I know that's two verses, but every time in fact, every one of the Bibles that I signed and I gave out this morning, in fact, pretty much every year I do this, those are the verses that I put in there to refer them to, because these are so important. And so I wanted to really spend some time just in this whole passage this morning in light of graduate recognition, but really as a reminder to any of us, we don't have to be graduates to get something from this, that there's a lot of good thoughts, a lot of good wisdom that maybe we need to be reminded of in terms of what the message I've titled this morning, Do's and Don'ts for Life. The do's and don'ts for life. You know, Proverbs is a book, it's called a wisdom book, and of course there are, you've got to read it without understanding. This is meant to be good advice, well thought out ideas that obviously that have come from God. They've come through His people. They're inspired. But there's no guarantees in life. We know that that's true as well. You can try to navigate life the way you will, and there's no guarantees. God still has a perfect plan and a perfect will, and we have to recognize that. But this is good wisdom. This is things that are meant to help us along the way in life. And oftentimes wisdom is gained through experience. When you read things like in the book of Proverbs, it is written from someone who has had experience. And they are trying to give the young people this wisdom in order that they don't have to learn it the hard way. Many of us have learned, if you've lived long enough, that there are things you've learned in school, and there's things you've learned through the school of hard knocks, right? Through the difficult things that you've figured out, this is not the way to do it. There's a story of a young man who wanted to go and become a priest all of his life. He eventually got to that point and made it through preschool or whatever they do. I don't know what they go through, but he got up into his first church there as a Catholic, and of course one of the things that they do is they have a confessional time. And he was under another priest who was like a mentor for him, and he says, "Well, we're going to have to watch you for a while and things like this." And so he was in there in the confessional booth, and people would come in and they would tell this young priest all of their sins and things like this, and the priest the young guy would say, "Wow, that's really awful." And the next guy would come in and he'd say, "Boy, wow, that's really terrible. Wow, I can't believe that." And finally he came out at the end, and the mentor said, "Well, how did it go?" He says, "There's a lot of real troubles in here." He says, "You're going to have to learn at some point to say more than, 'Wow, that's really bad.'" And, I guess eventually he learned something else to say. But, the do's and don'ts of life are things we have to learn by experience. We have to learn them. But the Bible gives us some wisdom here that I want us to share and reflect on today, because there are, in this passage, 2 don'ts and 3 do's for life that are really going to help us. The first is this. He says, "My son, forget not my law, but let thine heart keep my commandments. For length of days and long life and peace shall they add to thee." The first thing for a do's and don't of life is don't forget. Don't forget what? Well, the writer here in Proverbs says, "Do not forget my law." And this is written from a perspective of a father to a son. What is the law that he might be talking about? Well, the word for law here is, in fact, the same word that's used all through the Bible. It's the word Torah. You may have heard the word Torah before. When the Jews consider the Torah, they would say that's the first 5 books of the Bible are the Torah, or the law. Of course, they aren't always involved with law. This can refer to a legal code or a set of actual, laws that are being enforced. But this word also means someone's context, their manners, their instruction that they've given, the direction that they've instilled. So when you think about maybe a parent or a teacher or someone who has mentored you in some way, there may be some times where they've had to lay down the law, but more often than not, you have learned the best teachers are ones that you've been able to become an imitator of. Someone that you've looked at how they conduct their life, someone that you look up to and say, boy, this person has really given me good advice, good instruction, and I want to follow them. Some of the best teachers and hopefully the best parents that you've had have been good role models. And this is really what the Father here is saying to his Son. Don't forget my law. Let your heart keep my commandments. The Father basically raises this young man and he tells him, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget what your home life was all about. Don't forget what I've tried to instill in you. Remember what I taught you. Remember what was modeled for you as a positive role model. These are the things that he's telling this young person to do. And he doesn't want them to just do it and obey it like we sometimes expect the little kids to do, right? We give them the rules and we say, you have to follow the rules. No, he says it needs to go a step further than this. If you're going to be able to really, take and absorb what I've modeled for you, you've got to let it get down deep into your heart as well. And so that's why he says, let your heart keep my commandments. He says, this isn't just about, we all know kids. You say, go clean your room. And they say, I don't want to. And you say, clean your room with a little sterner voice. And they say, fine, right? And they stomp off to their room. And assuming that they didn't find another outlet, they do the job, right? And an hour later, they stomp right back down, still in that same mindset. They kept your commandments, but they didn't keep it with their heart, right? The heart was not involved in that keeping of the commandment. And this is what he says. He says, keep those things that I've taught you. Let them be in your heart. Do it from the heart. The things that you do in life need to be done because you believe in them. Because they are values that you want to have for yourself. When you think about people who have been the role models in your life, they're not fakes. They're not the ones who say one thing and do another. Who that they're doing the right thing, but on the inside you just wonder what kind of person they really are. These are people who are genuine. People who really believe what they're saying, who really live by what they're saying. And nobody's perfect. Nobody does it all the time. But this is the idea. If you're going to not just do what you're told, you've got to be able to internalize this and do it from the heart. Because obedience without the heart involvement really is disobedience. And the interesting thing is that the wisdom that this psalmist gives, he says, don't forget my law, don't forget my instruction. And he says, in the end, length of days and long life and peace shall they add to thee. He says, the result of not forgetting is a long and peaceful life. That's a good piece of wisdom for us. Well, let's look at the second one. He says, don't forget. The second thing he says is don't forsake. Verses 3 and 4, let not mercy and truth forsake thee. Bind them about thy neck, write them upon the table of thine heart. So shalt thou find favor and good understanding in the sight of God and men. So we have two things here that he says not to let these things forsake you. Let not mercy and truth forsake you. What does it mean to forsake? Well, he's using these two things, mercy and truth, as really things that are about to escape. He says the idea behind this is to abandon, to leave you, to desert you. He says, don't let those two things get away from you. Years ago, when I was a kid, I raised sheep. I was in 4-H and I raised sheep. I know some here raised some sheep, and maybe I just wasn't a very good sheep farmer. I don't know what I was, but nonetheless, I learned a few things about raising sheep. If you don't keep them on the leash, they get away. We kept them in the fence, but then I was supposed to walk them. You know, you're supposed to get them ready for the fair and do things with them and whatever. And I can remember one time I got one out, and somehow he got loose. He escaped me. The next thing I knew, the sheep was making circles around my house. And I was like, I can't catch him. I wasn't about to be able to run after him. And the more you did run after him, the more he ran faster, right? And so it was just like I just stood there and I just watched him. He just made laps, and hopefully he tired himself out. Eventually, I got him penned up again. But you get an animal loose, they will very quickly flee from you. I used to have a dog. I have lots of experience with animals that didn't listen to me. Used to have a dog. In fact, his name was Bingo. I named him when I was 3 years old. That was the only dog name I knew at 3, I think. But had him for many years. His name was Bingo. I could spell it and I could sing it. You know, it worked really well. But for many, many years, Bingo, you know, he wasn't a dog that was, we never had really indoor dogs, but he was a dog that you'd keep outside, and you keep him chained up when you needed to so you didn't run away. Because every time you let Bingo free, Bingo would run. Right, he would run the opposite direction from you. And not because he didn't know his name. I can remember one particular time, we lived next to a cornfield. Bingo got loose, and he took out across the cornfield. And I hollered, "Bingo!" And he stopped, and he turned and looked at me, and then he started running twice as fast, as farther away from me that he could. This is the concept behind this word forsake. Don't let them get away from you. Don't let them run away. Don't let them desert you or abandon you. You've got to keep them close. You got to keep them tied up. You're going to have to work diligently to keep mercy and truth in your life. Don't forsake those things. Don't let them forsake you. Mercy is this idea, by the way, of what is mercy. Well, it's a word that really God uses even in the New Testament for love. It's an unending, it's a steadfast love. It's a merciful love, an enduring type of love that continues regardless of how someone treats you. In the New Testament, this is the kind of love that when it says, when God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, it's that kind of merciful love. It's a never-ending, enduring love that isn't based on circumstance. It's based on a pure desire to show love to someone. That's what he's saying. Not mercy and truth. This idea behind truth is a faithful truthfulness. The idea of honesty or integrity. So if you think about it in those terms, he's saying, you know, honesty and integrity is something that's going to want to escape you. And there's going to be times when you're not going to want to love regardless of the circumstances. He says those are two things that are going to be easy to escape from your life. They're two things that are going to want to get away from you because, you know what, there's always that time when, hey, you know what, I can kind of shade the truth a little bit. Everything's, you know, going against me. I've got to get out of this situation that I'm in, and you know what, it's just a little twinge on the truth. No, he says, the idea is don't let that get away from you. Don't let people's treatment of you or the circumstances that you are in any way allow you to compromise the mercy, the merciful love, and the faithful truthfulness and integrity that you are called to have. Don't let those abandon you. The imagery here is you've got to work hard to keep those things in your life. Tie them, he says, bind them about your neck, tie them around your neck, write them on the table of your heart, put them in a place and in your life and embed them so deep that they can't get away. That's how the writer of Proverbs tells it to us. Don't forsake those things. Don't let them get away. And what does he say as a result? Thou shalt find favor and good understanding in the sight of God and men. Is that, obviously, we know where God stands in terms of mercy and truth. But have you ever thought about this? How do you get favor with other people? Well, you know, if you're living in politics, I know you've got to have deep pockets and you can pay for that favor. But in the end, it's not real favor, is it? If you want to have true favor, you know, you've got to show someone, I'm someone that has integrity. And I'm going to show you that I'm genuine and I really care for people regardless. Those are the kind of things that you see, this is a true person. People notice that about you. And when you exhibit those godly characteristics, the Bible says you're going to have favor amongst them as well as with God. So don't allow mercy and truth to forsake you. Let's look at the next one. Verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. This is the first do. We need to follow. Do follow. Where are we following? Well, that's the idea behind trusting in the Lord with all of your heart. You know, you're presented with two choices in life about who and what you're going to follow. There's really only two choices. I know there's lots of paths you could take, but there's really only two choices about who or what you're going to follow. And here it says, trust in the Lord, or follow him with all of your heart. If you're going to trust him, he says you've got to do it with all of your heart. Not just as a backup plan, not just to see if you like his advice, not just to maybe give you some support or some, a little extra boost for the plans that you've already made for yourself. No, he says you need to trust him with all your heart. But he says the other option is still out on the table. He says you can either trust him with all your heart, or you're going to find yourself trusting in you with all yourself, with all of your heart. He says don't lean onto your own understanding. That's really the problem. You know, especially, I think I mentioned this, we were talking around the dinner table. This is the kind of stuff we talk about. Talking about sophomores. And where does the word sophomore come from? Well, it comes from the Greek, which is sophos, which is, it's the idea of wisdom. Okay, why do they call sophomores wisdom? Because they think they know it all. By the time you become a senior, you realize, I've gotten through, and I realize how much I don't know, right? You just barely get through. But you come in as a freshman or a sophomore, boy, you've got the answers, right? What's the first problem with that? They find they're very quickly, their understanding is incomplete. You know, they say that one of the worst things you can do is take one psychology class, right? One semester of Psychology 101. You know why? Because then you have an answer to everybody's psychological problems everywhere they go. It's only after you get through your psychology degree that you realize I don't have any answers for anybody's problems, right? This is the idea. You can't lean on your own understanding. You know why? Because no matter where you think you are in life or how much you think you know, your understanding will always be incomplete. It will never be as complete as what God's understanding is, right? We recognize that. We say, yeah, the Bible uncovers that for us. We know that God does all these things, but in the end, we still have this proclivity to come back to, well, but I think I know. I think I can answer this one. I don't need God's help on this. No, the Bible says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not unto your own understanding. You can't see down around the bend in life. You're going to be inherently self-serving if you lean on your own understanding. And so he says, this is what you need to do. Follow him completely. And how do you do that? How do you keep your trust in the Lord? He says, in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Acknowledge him, know him, recognize him, come to understand his will for you, and follow that unreservedly. Don't look to what you might want. Recognize that he's got a better plan. Sometimes it's hard to accept that someone else has a better plan for you than you do. We all come up with ideas in life that we think, this is really what I want to do. And we start to pursue that. And sometimes God gives us those things. And sometimes God, paves the way for us to have those things. And sometimes he doesn't. He shuts the door. Remember when I was a little kid, since I'm telling stories about being a kid today. When I was a little kid, I don't know how old I was, but I was old enough to understand business. So I was probably in elementary school, and one of the things that I wanted to do with all my heart, and I thought about it, I thought about the business model, I had a whole plan designed. I wanted to open a donut shop. I thought, I can go and I could make these donuts if I sell them for this much, and I could make this much money, Cass is back there shaking her head. She's happy for this. She's the donut connoisseur here amongst us. But donuts, I thought that's the business model to have. Who doesn't like a donut, right? That's going to go on forever, And then, I started watching those Dunkin' Donuts commercials. You remember back from the 80s? And there's an old guy, right? He'd get up, he had a mustache and the Dunkin' Donut thing, and he'd get up, time to make the donuts, right? And it was like 3 in the morning or something. I thought, well, that's enough of that. Find something else to do. My own understanding when I was an elementary kid said, donut shops are the way to go. That's the direction I want to head in life. Until I realized that was, a little incomplete, right? Our understanding was a little short-sighted. And when you're in the middle of developing your own plans for yourself, you're blinded to the short-sightedness you have. You're blinded to what really is coming down the pike. You don't know. You don't know what tomorrow is. You don't know what God's about to do. Intersection's going to happen in your life. You've got to trust in the Lord with all your heart. You've got to acknowledge Him and then let Him direct your paths. Sometimes it may not be a straight path. It may be a meandering, path through the forest. But nonetheless, He will be the one that directs you through it, and He will get the glory in the end because of it. So we must follow the Lord. Then we go to the next one, verses 7 and 8. We do fear. We must fear. It says, verse 7 and 8, be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. It shall be health to thy navel, and marrow to thy bones. So we are called to fear the Lord. Now, this is a word that we don't like to use much in terms of our relationship with God. We want to say, I want to love the Lord my God with all my heart. That's true. But the God that created the universe, the God that is all-powerful and all-knowing and all-present, is a God that we should have some fear of. Not in terms of I'm afraid of Him, because we know that He loves us. We know that He cares for us, that He wants a relationship with us. But we fear Him because He is so much more powerful than we are. That fear idea is to give reverence, to give respect toward Him, to stand in awe of God. And just as you have two options in terms of what you will trust in or what you will follow in life, you really have two options as to what you will fear in life as well. You will either fear the Lord or you'll fear something or anyone else. It says here, be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. That idea of wise is to be crafty or shrewd or skilled. You can place, again, your confidence in what you know, in who you know, how good you are at manipulating, how good you are at working the angles and working around things or having street smarts. And you know what? A lot of people get through life working the angles. A lot of people get through life, working off of their ability to manipulate or be shrewd or be crafty in what they're doing and the plans that they make. And what does he say? Don't allow yourself to go down that track. He says you need to fear the Lord and depart from evil, because when you fear the Lord, you'll quickly find out that your own best wisdom cannot outrun or outplay or outlive or outthink or be shrewd enough to put God in some kind of a checkmate. I think that's the problem. We tend to get ourselves to the place where we think, well, yeah, God's there somewhere, but I can run a play and get around where He's at. We may not say it in those words, but essentially that's what we're doing. We're wise in our own eyes to the extent that we say, I don't really need to fear Him because I think I can manipulate the situation. I think I can get around the problem that I see. And this is what he is saying. Don't allow that to happen. Don't think that you're going to be shrewd enough to get around what the Lord really wants from you, and it's only going to lead you to an evil path. Fear the Lord, he says, depart from evil. And he says, it shall be health to thy navel and marrow to thy bones. So I ask the question, why does the wisdom here say that this results in good health? Well, I want to just propose this. I don't know what the writer here had in mind, but when you fear the Lord, they say that number one issue that contributes to poor health is stress, right? You ever see pictures of presidents when they take office versus 4 years later, and they look like they've just been through the war, right? That happens to every president, And you say, why is that? Well, they've gone through a lot of stress over those 4 years. I don't care whether they've been peaceful times or war times. They've been through stress, unlike most of us see. Stress is the number one problem that we have that deals with our health. But when you fear in the Lord, and when you trust in Him, and when you're doing what you believe is right by saying God's in control, do you know what? You alleviate that stress. If I have a God that's in control, I don't have to try to control those things. That's not to say I don't have responsibilities. I don't have this laissez-faire attitude that says, well, I can do what I want and live how I want. That's not the point. But the point is, when I put my trust completely in the Lord, and I know I have a clean conscience before Him, and I have put my life in His hands, it's like the song that we just sang, His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. That's the attitude we get. What did Jesus even explain? He says, who feeds the birds? Do they sit around and worry and are anxious that somebody's going to feed them today? God makes sure they're taken care of. He says, do you think, and this is my paraphrase, obviously. He says, do you think that the flowers in the field have to worry about how pretty they're going to look today? No, God just prepares them. And they look better than Solomon did in all of his glory. The point is this. We have to recognize God is truly in control. Fear Him. Fear Him in a positive way, and it takes away the stress because I don't have to manipulate. I don't have to control. I don't have to figure it all out. I just have to trust and move forward. That results in good health. The worst thing you can do is to work for something that you can never be. We have this illusion that we have control, that we have the power over our situation, that we can somehow get the accolades or praise from other people. And you know what? Our wisdom may bring us down to that path, but He says, don't let it happen. Don't let yourself be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord, depart from evil, and you'll find that it's good health, the result of fearing the Lord. Well, let's look at the last one together. Verses 9 and 10. We are to be faithful. It says, do be faithful. Honor the Lord with all thy substance, with the first fruits of all thine increase. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy presses shall burst out with new wine. The idea here is to give to the Lord, to be faithful in serving Him, not just in terms of dollars and cents, but in terms of what resources He's given you. I speak about this maybe too regularly, but the truth is, we all have gifts and talents. We all have a certain amount of time each day. We all have a certain amount of, assets or money in the bank, if you will. That all of those things are whose? They're the Lord's. We're stewards of them. God's blessed us with those things in our lives, but He expects us to bring those things back to Him as an offering. And so when we see honor the Lord with thy substance, it's not just talking about money, it's talking about all of your substance, all that you have. Every little bit of something you have to contribute, you need to be contributing. The idea of this word honor comes from a Hebrew root that means to make heavy. It means come and just load God up with as much as you can give Him. Take whatever He's given you and do all you can to load Him up, to honor Him with riches that He's given you. And that's the idea behind this. Give the Lord as much as you can. Not that He needs it. We sing the song, God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, right? The wealth in every mine. At least when I was a kid, we sang that one. We don't sing it as much anymore. But the truth is this, it's very much a truth. God already owns it all. God gives to us. God can take from us. God owns it all. And we just have to realize we're not giving him anything he doesn't already own. When we honor the Lord with our substance, with the first fruits of your increase, it's your way of honoring him and putting him first in your life. What did Jesus say? You can't serve God and mammon. That word for mammon is your substance, your life. You can't serve the things that you have and serve God at the same time. When you start loading God up with those things that you have, as much as you can give, that demonstrates an honor that you have for him. We talk about the tithe, and I think Malachi still is true. The tithe is the Lord's. But how many times do we calculate, well, I'm going to have to do post-tax on that tithe, and it's 23 cents, so how do I divide 3 in half, and what's a tenth of 3 cents? I'm not sure, so I'll just, take that penny off. How exact do we have to get with the tithe? Is that honoring the Lord with your substance? I'm not saying we shouldn't. We need to be tithing. But the God says, bring us our tithes and offerings. Bring us not just the bare minimum. Let's see how much we can give. Let's see how much we can offer to the Lord. If God's given you some extra time, you ought to say, Lord, how can I use this for you today? If God's given you some extra dollars in your bank account, Lord, where do you want me to spend this today? How can I honor you with what I've got? I've got some talents that I'm not using. Well, God, how can I be used of you to use those talents to further your work? We should be asking those questions. How can I load more of what I've got to God? And what does he say is the result of this? He says, your barn shall be filled with plenty, and your presses shall burst out with new wine. It's the old adage, you can't outgive God. You can't outgive God. You may think, I'll be short. I can't do this. Well, you know what? You're not going to. I'm not a health and wealth prosperity gospel person. Don't get me wrong. Don't hear me wrong today. It's not like, well, you plant a seed for $1 and he'll send you 100. He may not send you a $100 bill. I can't say what he's going to do. But he does say the wisdom is this. He's going to reward you for putting him first in terms of what substance that you have. Prosperity. You say, what's the key to prosperity? The answer is right here in the proverb, putting God first with all that you have. That's the key to prosperity. That's what the Proverbs tell us. So some do's and don'ts for life. So whether you're a graduate or whether you're just here today, I have 5 things that I want each one of you to have. And God does too. A long and peaceful life. Favor and wisdom with God and men. To know the right paths in life. To have good health. And to have prosperity. And the good news is, we don't just have to wish people that like we wish people Merry Christmas. He says, I've got 5 ways you can get there. Don't forget the instruction you've been given. Don't forsake the loving kindness of God and his truth. Follow the Lord with all of your heart. Fear the Lord more than anyone else. And be faithful to God in all your ways and with all that you have. And those other 5 things that I'm wishing, they don't just become wishes. They become rewards for what God says he's called us to do. So I hope that's a challenge to you this morning. Wherever you're at in life, the do's and don'ts, because we need to be reminded of them from time to time.